to you. Thank you for joining today's session on NFT. I think a very hot topic currently in the market, and I think the media has covered that quite substantially. Thank you for joining. This is going to be the first inaugural discussion on NFT. This particular topic is going to be the first one and not going to be the last. There's going to be a whole series of other panels that's going to do deep dive into the topic from various angles. So don't worry. You will have your pet topics or pet angles or your various perceptions and stuff like that being covered in other panels. Today, we're just going to cover a very high level overview of what NFTs and the opportunities that it's going to cover, right? And then in future, looking at our space, you will feel that, you will see that we will be publishing a couple of panels being set up with various other experts in the space, artists, content creators, investors, technology providers, and etc., as well as academics to cover that. So stay tuned, right, and enjoy the session. First and foremost, let me hand over this particular next session over to Hot Lai, the co-chair of Blockchain Association of Singapore, to actually give you a bit of understanding, primer on the NFTs. Over to you, Hot Lai.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. This is so far our most popular webinar with close to 400 people registered, like what Kevin shared. Okay, I will give a quick primer on. Can you hear me?
Yes, good. We can hear you. Go on. Thank you.
Okay, I'll have a very diverse group of audience joining us in this webinar. Then first and foremost, right, what exactly are non-fungible tokens? To talk about non-fungible tokens, we have to talk about what is a fungible token. So basically, fungible tokens are tokens that are interchangeable with one another. So $1 is exactly the same as another $, same as one Bitcoin is the same as the other Bitcoin, which you can exchange for one another. Okay. Conversely, for a non-fungible token, they are not interchangeable with one another, and they could have unique properties that can make them radically different from one another, even though they may look similar. So for example, a cat is different from another cat, or even your cinema tickets, whether you are in the front row, you are the back row, you are the middle row, they are different, or even one plot of land is quite different from the other. So what are the main properties of a non-fungible token? If you look at the diagram on my right-hand side, right, this is actually NBA Top Shot NFT. So basically, there are a total of 49 of all these short video clips. And then, as you can see, is for this video clip of LeBron James, and it's selling for $3,800. So basically, NFTs, right, they are unique, as in like each of these specific video clip of the play they are making. So it's unique, and usually they are rare. It can be one piece or a limited supply. And for this case, is only 49 pieces available. They are also traceable, as in like you will know the whole provenance, who owns this right from the start till the end. And each of them are indivisible from one another. And last but not least, each of the NFT are programmable. Basically, you are able to add in logic to it. For example, you can say that if this piece of NFT is being resold, 10% of the proceeds can go back to the original creator. So what are the different use cases of NFT? The most popular now is really digital collectibles, things like CryptoPunks and Crypto Kitties. For example, like CryptoPunks, I understand that just last month, one of it was sold for 7.5 million. Next is gaming. One of the very popular game on NFT is this game called Axie Infinity. It's actually inspired by Pokemon. Basically, you collect some cute monsters, and you actually train them to fight in battles. And along the way, you can actually collect collectibles that you can then trade with one another. And the third thing is really art, or what we call a crypto art. And the most popular of this obviously is the one that was sold for 69 million. The everyday is the first 5,000 days digital collage. The other use cases are virtual assets, and one of the very defining use cases is actually Decentraland and crypto vexers. For example, when Decentraland was launched in 2017, you can buy the virtual land for about $20 a piece. Recently, you have to pay up to 100,000 for it, which is a 5,000 times increase. And there are also use cases which is still rare for now, which is using it for real world assets. For example, Nike last year actually patented a system to tokenize the Nike shoes to have the equivalent of NFT. They call it crypto kicks. In fact, if you have two crypto kicks, you can actually combine them to come out with new offspring of these crypto kicks. And lastly, it can be used in identity. For example, with the NFT-based identity systems, right? Users can use it to protect and even control what kind of personal information they can release to other parties. But NFTs are not new. In fact, it started in 2012 by Bitcoin's colored coins. Unfortunately, it did not take off because of the limitation of Bitcoin's scripting language. This is a very non-standard implementation, and it died off. In 2015, this mobile game Spells of Genesis became the first to issue an in-game asset onto the blockchain. In 2016, people start issuing this limited edition of rare PPs. Okay, and then this is a very powerful demonstration of the human desire to own something that is rare and commonly perceived aesthetic and collectible value. You can look at the one on the right hand side. This in 2019, this very rare Homer Simpson PP was sold for $38,500. In June 2017, CryptoPunks created 10,000 of these 24 times 24 pixel characters, and they kept 1,000 for themselves. And these CryptoPunks subsequently became the standard for ERC 721, and that ushered in CryptoKitties. I just saw a news that CryptoPunks, they are releasing nine of the original CryptoPunks in Christie's auction in the month of May. And for CryptoKitties, it was launched in October 2017. It is really a virtual game built on the Ethereum platform for people to breed, to raise, to trade virtual cats. In fact, at its height, right, the most expensive CryptoKitty was sold for close to $170,000 US. If you look on the right-hand side, right, this pair of CryptoPunks was sold for 1.66 million Ether recently in February 2021. So this is the ecosystem for non-fungible tokens. On one hand, you have all the various marketplaces where people can trade, can buy and sell their NFTs. You have the infrastructure players to enable you to trade on CryptoKitties. And then you have the games and collectibles, the studios that are producing all these NFTs, and even the individual creators who are creating all these NFTs. What are the challenges of NFT? First and foremost, right, it is not so accessible because it requires someone who, with the knowledge of using a decentralized app. You need to know how to use, for example, MetaMask. You must have access to crypto to play this game. It is a novel technology. Not many people understand the underlying technology, and some has a misunderstanding that it is not safe, or what is being sold is not authentic. And also because of the immense popularity, not just on NFT, but also on decentralized finance. Now the transaction fees are in terms of $50 to $100 per transaction. And fourth one is on regulation, which the panelists will discuss extensively later. And the last one is really about how do you link real world assets as NFTs? And how do you ensure that the ownership is being ensured? So these are some of the key challenges. So the key takeaways is that NFT is really just fungible tokens with some scarcity, okay? And there are already a wide range of use cases, whether is it in terms of collectibles, gaming, art, virtual assets, and even real world assets. While NFT is not new, CryptoPunks really popularized it, but NFT undergo a winter during the period of 2018 to 2020 after the burst of the ICO bubble. The adoption of NFT is still relatively low if you compare to mainstream cryptos because of all the variants that I alluded earlier. And I think really the next evolution of NFT really depends on the big institutional players like the big gaming companies or even big media companies like Disney, when they start converting a lot of their assets into NFT. Okay, with that, I end my primer, handing over to Kevin.
Hey, Kevin, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay, just didn't want to get my noise out just now. So, okay, with that in mind, thank you very much to Hotline for the session on the primer on NFTs. I think that sets a very good stage to the rest of the audiences who are probably new to this topic, so they can actually appreciate more as we go along in the panel. So without further ado, let me just introduce two members in the panel. First and foremost, we have Howie Lau, who is the Assistant Chief Executive of IMDA and also a fellow with the Singapore Computer Society. And then we have Chua Ju Leong, who is actually the Director of and also the Head of Blockchain in Drew and Napier law firm. And he's also a very unique position of being the General Counsel for the Ethereum Foundation. Next, we have Journey Lee, who is the APAC Marketing Manager for Illutic, one of the companies that does transaction monitoring on blockchain, right, for illegal transactions, things like that. So last but not least, probably introduce myself. My name is Kevin. I'm actually the Secretary for Blockchain Association of Singapore, as well as actually the chair for this blockchain committee in SG Tech, as well as I run my couple of companies, one of which is actually called Mass Panda World, which is going to launch an NFT marketplace platform for both games and probably artwork as well. So without further ado, I think before we start this, probably a bit of disclaimer. For most of the other folks that represent the various big organizations and even some is government, I would want to give the disclaimer that all views and opinions are of individuals. That does not represent the organization that they are from, right? So with that, let's start the panel. Let me just kick off with a very quick, quick question and probably a topic to start it off is that we would like to look at the overall view of the NFT phenomenon, right? So, and I think Howie has a very good spin on that or good take on that, right? So Howie, over to you, probably.
Thanks, Kevin. The I didn't actually prepare a set of slides, but just now in the preamble we spoke a bit about it. So well, I think first of all, I'm looking forward to a learning session because when Hawkeye first brought this up, I was interested to join in, partly for learning, partly because of the things that IMD tries to do in terms of broader IT system, but also my hobby in art as a novice art collector, as well as studying art history. So let me just share this slide because leading up to this prep, I shared with the panelists, and I think Kevin thought might be useful to share this slide. So let me just pull it out. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe I'll just talk quickly. Sorry, the slide's not as clear and as pretty as what Hawkeye has, but I was scribbling this some days ago because thinking through the shifts in art. So if you look at the bottom part of it, for simplicity, the pre-modern days will predate to all the pre-Renaissance and all that, and then leading obviously to the modern art period, the contemporary, and for lack of a better descriptive, everything that is on the forefront, we call it avant-garde. But if you look at where the shifts have been happening, you can almost argue that you follow the the green line from the bottom first, that in the pre-modern stage, the shifts were moving largely from religious, cultural topics to, as we get to contemporary, probably more political subject matters. And generally for the longest time, if you follow the purple line, for the longest time, the medium and the format was traditionally 2D. Essentially, it was paintings. Whether it was oil paintings or later it went to become acrylic and watercolor, it was generally two-dimensional. But as we started to move into the contemporary phase, then obviously there was a lot more different formats, installation arts, performative arts in multi-dimension. And clearly with the world now getting a lot more hyper-digital and the reality of a metaverse, and that's why I chucked a metaverse right at the end of it, because it would mean an explosion of potential formats and approaches that artists could use to represent their ideas and to represent their art beyond the traditional 2D, beyond the traditional sculptures, beyond the traditional installation and performative art. And if you see with the first horizontal line there, money is always important in the art world, as with every other industry. If you look at the pre-modern days, obviously the source of funds and the patrons came from churches, came from kings, whether it's the Angkor Wats of the world or the churches that you see in Europe. Generally, those were for simplicity. Those are the sources of funding. And obviously then the source of patrons and the source of funds have changed over as we turn into this century. But what could be now very interesting is that NFTs and what it represents and cryptos could represent the new ways that is funding this art market. And the last two up there essentially just a representation to say that there's a lot more interest in Asia, in Asian art. And at the same time, that if you look at the art market itself, it is evolving from your usual Christie Sotheby's to potentially new platforms like the ones that Kevin and many others are creating as well. So this was just a chicken scratching and doodling a few days ago. So since Kevin suggested I shared, so this was just a way of trying to frame what is happening out there.
Thank you, Howie. I think this is very good. I think, this is, I won't say scribbling. I think this is a very clear graphical, I would say representation of that entire view. And I think this can be actually explored further, I think, in future panels when we deep dive into evolution of art, from and all that, because I think definitely NFT, and I think we're going to talk about that later, has actually kind of evolved art as well, right? From stationary to even potentially light living art as well. So I think with that in mind, I would like to also extend this, probably some comments from the other panelists as well. Maybe Jenny, you want to see what do you think of this? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kevin and Howie. I think I probably would like to just highlight one characteristic of NFT, which is actually how digital art can finally be collected. Because as we know, a lot of digital content, right, they can be easily replicated, right? You copy and paste, right click and save. So a lot of people are saying, why would I pay for like an image or a GIF or a video clip? But what NFT essentially allowed people to own and to prove that they have this ownership is really the issuance, and then the transaction, the value, the time stamping, like the whole history of the beginning and to the end. So I think that's what the most intriguing part of NFT is, and that really encouraged a lot of digital native creators to join this party. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Julia, any probably comment from you?
Yeah, I think just as thanks first of all for inviting me to this. I think as both Howie and Jenny and when I did the overview earlier have said, this basically is an explosion of new potential formats and structures for there to be art and for art to be funded and to go from creator to audience in very different ways. And I really do see this as kind of a trend overall, right? Not just in the crypto space, but if you look at things like Patreon and Substack and so forth, right? Opportunities for creators of all stripes, of in all sorts of media, to move away from the very rigid traditional old way of connecting with the end users. I think there's a whole explosion of new ways to do this, and it's going to be very interesting.
Cool. Thank you for that. With that in mind, I think we can move on to the next one, which is closely related as well. So probably the thing is that how will NFT affect the evolution of art and other contents? And again, not necessarily just art. I think even now I've seen some NFTs, right? They are even poetry and of course music, but that's another topic altogether. But art related wise, even poetry has become art right now. And so the question is that, how do we feel that it can actually affect the evolution of art? I've seen NFTs, like I mentioned, that are live, right? For instance, the NFT is initially origin just a very simple couple of lines and diagrams or poppy circle, which is not very clear. But as more and more people kind of support the NFT, it actually evolved, right? The artist actually added more elements to it. The image becomes clearer and all that. There's another NFT that that have additional art added on to the art piece itself, when more and more people kind of like support it as well. So I think this is an evolution of art that's probably not seen previously in other centuries, definitely. Even in the digital art form, it doesn't have this kind of evolution because of the support. So your comments, your thoughts on how can this potentially affect the evolution of art and stuff. So maybe I will start with this time around, start with Journey. Maybe your thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think when it comes to crypto art and probably just other digital content in general, I think NFT really sort of supports so many different aspects of it. As you have mentioned, there's like collectibles, trading cards, such as NBA Top Shot, which has achieved over $500 million in sales. And essentially people are actually owning and trading a short video clip of their favorite basketball players. And of course, I think you have probably also seen the news of Jack Dorsey, who is the founder of Twitter, has sold his first tweet for $2.9 million. So NFT really allow people to pretty much own anything digitally. And I think that really encourage more creators, right, to sort of issue and to create more content. And I think probably it's also important to highlight that when people are talking about buying NFT, at the moment, it's actually two components. So there's one component, which is a token. And this token is minted on the blockchain, and it's the part that actually records, the issuance details, the particulars, the properties of what you're buying. And then there's another component of this NFT, which is the assets, the underlying assets. And because of the block size limits, right? And now actually a lot of, the image or the music clips that you mentioned, they're actually stored in another place. Usually it's called IPFS, which is the interplanetary file system. So people can actually use this token that they owned with the hash that they can link to this file system. That's how they track like what they're owning. Again, I guess that kind of like clarified when people say, why am I buying an image? Why am I buying a GIF or a video clip? Yeah, that's all from me now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna go on next to Howie again. So I think this ties in terms of, because I think it's you had a very good diagram that it kind of also ties in, talks about the evolution of art and content as well. So how do you think that NFT can really help to evolve art and also content? Because I think the lines between media, as in like art is divided into various kind of like art forms, right? You have like physical art, you have like moving art, you have digital media art, as in like videos and all that. So how do you think that what do you think your thoughts on it helps in the evolution of this particular art form into a probably single art form, or is it going to take on a new,
I think
yeah,
I think perhaps in the impact is probably most pronounced in three areas. I think one area we spoke about is that it expands the potential format and ways of expression of art beyond the type of medium. I think what you alluded to as well is things like collaborative art, co-production, crowdsource. I think so the format of explosion is potentially going to be a very exciting space to watch. I think the second space, which is tightly related to the actual nature of NFTs, and as Hoklai described it, end of the day, it is about giving you a certificate of ownership, which is tightly correlated to provenance in the existing artwork. And today, your provenance is a very key part of your art valuation, your authenticity of your art, and the ownership of the art. Some of you remember that a few years ago, there was a very, very famous painting, now still the world's most expensive painting by Leonardo, the Salvador Mundi, for $450 million. It was auctioned off. That same painting was originally, I think if I'm not wrong, back in 1950s or so, originally attributed to a student of Leonardo, Beltrafio or something like that. And it was auctioned off at 58 pounds or 60 pounds. It was a very low cost because the provenance was pointing to the student. But later when the provenance was changed to say that it's actually by Leonardo, and like what Halai said, the scarcity of it created this bidding frenzy that drove it up to $450 million. So this whole world of provenance is going to change as well, because the traditional world of provenance would include things like spectrometry, certificates, and all that will have its parallel in the digital world. So I think that's the second area that will have a huge impact. The third area is actually bias. Without bias, there's no art market, there's no art ecosystem. And maybe the way to categorize bias is that bias of art would typically have three different types of motivation. One motivation is material motivation. That means I want to own it. I feel that I need to invest. I want to buy it because there's an investable value. So the material driver behind it. There's a second driver of buying, which is more emotional. That means I happen to like it. I have an emotional appeal. I love it. You know, I can associate with what the artist is trying to say, the emotional side. The third aspect is very important as well. It's called the social aspect, because there are folks who buy art today who buy it because they want to. For the Singaporeans in the audience, it's the Haulian factor. That I want to buy a piece of art so that I can show my taste, I can show off my social status, I can represent a social status that I would aspire to be. So if you look at art bias, you have your material bias, material drivers, your emotional drivers, as well as your social drivers. And then you plonk it in this new world with this explosion of medium. And I think it will still exist. You will still have folks who want to buy it, because if I buy I'm excited to see how Christie do with the cyberpunk, because Sotheby has also launched a NFT. I suspect a good bunch of it is buying it so that they are able to fulfill their social tick. And there'll be some of it hoping that they can achieve their material tick, because after they buy it, they may want to resell it. So I think the same drivers will still be there. It's just that it now widens the potential buyer pool of the art market, which I think is great. So long as there's more buyers and there's more money into the market, I think art will always prevail and be buoyant. So I'm actually very optimistic that it will actually do a lot of good for the art ecosystem.
Thank you. And I really, really do agree with that as well, because I think, you know, on this entire thing about evolution and also about the market, right? I mean, previously, you see the word poor has always been unfortunately associated with artists. I think previously, before this digital revolution, no doubt we do have art that goes out for millions of dollars, but we have struggling artists trying to get by for a few dollars and all that. But now you have artists have an avenue for them to be able to distribute the art to the masses easily and quickly as well. So suddenly you have lots of new content creators, and their art gets sold for say either at least a respectable amount of money to even crazy amount of money as well. So suddenly there's a new interest on art and also creation. People are looking to creating their own art, versus previously is that art is ready for the artist and not for me, right? So I think I can see that there is potentially an evolution and also a new interest in the space of art and cultural development. Okay, so Julian, maybe your thoughts as well.
Sure. I guess they follow along the same lines as what Howie has said. One thing that definitely interests me is the in terms of the evolution, is how much it has been driven by gatekeepers historically to date. So to the extent that because with physical art, as we talked about earlier, there's almost an art mafia, right? There's a group of people who determine and curate what is valuable, what is not, and who gatekeep artists' access to the audience, and quite frankly, extract maximum value out of the system as intermediaries. So with NFTs, with the ability of artists to reach consumers directly, I think that changes the dynamic of what people are looking for as well. So instead of having essentially self-appointed elite to determine what is good art, this is now fully determined by the marketplace.
Excellent, excellent. And this actually ties in with the next topic we want to discuss, right? How does this entire, evolution in NFTs and distribution NFTs will actually disrupt the traditional art distribution channel, as you correctly mentioned, right? There are such, so-called intermediaries that act as like art mafia. They probably sell the art for, that amount of money, and the artists only get 10%. They collect 90% among themselves, right? So obviously this is going to disrupt some of them, or maybe even enhance for some of them to even get better profits. But does it translate to, for some of these folks to translate to downstream to the artists is a big question. But for independent platforms and for artists to go direct to the buyers, I think that is really a disruption in itself. And I'll see that it will only help the entire industry get it better as well. But of course, I would also want to hear the thoughts of Howie. What do you think, right? Disrupting the NLSoft journey. What do you think? Disrupting the art mafia, good thing, bad thing, or it's going to, we're going to look at buying art totally different from now on. For you, Howie, you can start.
Yeah, I think the ability to go for the artists to go direct to the market is already available today, even before NFTs, whether you have online sites or otherwise. Yes, you're right in that it's still largely driven by, because the primary market and secondary market is still quite buoyant, and that's probably explains the reason why Sotheby's and Christie's, who are the number 1 and 2s in the auction market, are jumping so quickly into this space. So I think, as with all the industry that has seen the introduction of D2C, direct to consumer, whether in the streaming world, whether in the e-commerce world, whether in the hotel, Airbnb type of world, we will definitely see new shapes and new players and new platforms coming out. I suspect that the dynamics of art valuation may not change that much, because at the end of the day, it's still a perception of rarity, perception of quality, perception of provenance, perception of collectability, as it hits your three needs of material, social, and emotional. So I think that drivers of value would still be broadly the same, except the mechanisms may be slightly different. So I don't think we have to be too imaginative. We just look at all the industries that has already been impacted, like transportation, like e-commerce, and I think we'll see similar model playing out. We'll probably get to a stage where now there is a proliferation. It's a bit like Gartner's hype cycle, where you have this, what was the initial phase called? It's called the peak of
adoption, right?
No,
adoption
peak of
curve.
inflated expectation. So I think we're probably now at this peak of inflated expectation, and then at some stage we'll go through some disillusionment, and then at some stage after the disillusionment we'll get to some enlightenment. So I think we're probably at a stage.
Okay, cool. And okay, so to Journey, what are your thoughts, right? Disrupting, I think we probably heard a lot of this probably in the media saying, hey, it's going to disrupt all these guys, and then let the artists go direct. So content creators are pretty happy right now. They don't have to go to the intermediary to sell their artwork, and they get the money directly back, into their crypto wallet, which they can then change to fiat currency in the bank account, right? So I think it looks well and fine, but then is there any implications, do you think, right, by disrupting this space? Journey, your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think probably we'll just give 2 examples. Again, one of the most popular NFT projects called NBA Top Shots, right? The reason why they're doing so well, I think mainly is because it's licensed by NBA. So it's very different from, NBA Top Shot selling these clips of their highlight moments versus Journey upload NBA clips onto OpenSea. So I think in that sense, actually, NBA Top Shot, they are actually still partnering with so-called gatekeeper who's traditionally recognized in the sports arena. And also, I think one of the reasons why NBA Top Shot is doing so well is also because the whole user experience is designed very, very elegantly and simply. If you go to their website, you don't see anything mentioning blockchain or even NFT or crypto at all. And people can buy these packs of video clips with like a mystery kind of box that you buy, and then you open and you see what clips you collect with credit card. So again, I think that kind of lower the entry and really bring a lot of mainstream people outside of crypto into the NFT scene. And another example I think I would like to mention is, of course, Cent, which is the platform that people can actually offer to buy tweets. And I think it's very interesting because essentially it's not just the creator come to the market and say, I have this to offer, but actually as a buyer, you can just say, can I offer to buy your tweet? And of course, if the creator say, okay, sure, I accept your offer, and then I can sell it. Again, I think that's a very interesting dynamics between the creator and collector.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so going
Hey,
on to
Kevin,
yeah,
if I
sorry.
can just jump into what Jenny talked about, I think
Sure.
it's a great reminder that the early days of e-commerce was very difficult to use. And right now we're probably at the phase because I tried going to OpenSea. They asked me to get a MetaMask. I went to CoinHako, tried to buy some Ethereum, and in the end, I still can't figure out how to buy anything. So, so I think at some stage the journey is going to get a lot easier, and I think that's where the next level of explosion will happen.
Okay, cool. Then I mean that's
Kevin,
I think.
If I could add to that as well, I mean, we talked earlier about gatekeepers and traditional distribution, right? And disrupting that. There's a gatekeeping function, right? Where you kind of like have authority to stop people. And then there's, kind of like people come to you because you're adding value, right? So if you're the, number one curator, everybody recognizes that you have great taste. That's not gatekeeping per se, right? It's not stopping people, and that's going to be needed, right? So it's when artists say I'm going to go direct to consumer, they are taking on themselves also a massive burden of workload, right? That for writers, there's an editor and so forth. There's a whole group of people who do quite a lot of work in adding value at that point. And if it's not being done by whoever is the centralized source now, it's got to be done by somebody.
That's right. That's right. Agree. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the next point. Okay, so this is regards to the media industry and coming definitely Howie from IMD. I think this is the question that will have to direct to you first. So what do you think are the largest shifts in media industry implications for Singapore, given that this is taken on a very, very quick and development, not just in art, but in media and content? What do you think are the implications for Singapore and also the shift in the media industry in this development NFT? Yep.
And I think some of the shifts are also kind of related to what's happening here, because you see broadly in the media entertainment world, there's a few broad shifts happening. One is that there is an explosion of content. There's more content now than ever before. In the past, you could argue that your premium content or the content that folks would gravitate to would be your TV, your pay TV, and your cinemas. But today, the amount of content that's available out there in all sorts of formats is just amazing. So there's an explosion of content. The second big shift is that the ways of monetization is shifting. The traditional value chain in terms of how you actually make money in content has changed quite a fair bit. ByteDance uses one way, Big O uses one way, the web formats uses another way. So everyone's trying to look at different ways of creating monetization, because in the past the world was a lot more finite, a lot more predictable. So you kind of know what's your cost to create content and how do you sell it. But that whole value chain network is being disrupted because even the most basic, for example, D2C, your direct to consumer, Netflix came about. Now we have Disney Plus, we have HBO Max, we have View, we have almost everything you can think of is actually on some form of OTT. So that is also being disrupted. The third is that we're also seeing a shift of formats into experiential, which is quite unique, because as the world gets a lot more digital, the premium around experiential becomes higher as well. So that's probably a few clicks down, whether it's in terms of AR, VR enhanced or otherwise. But we're also seeing a shift towards a premium towards experiential. And obviously tech has become a big part of media, which enables all of us to be content creators. In the past, if you wanted to do a good movie, you probably need the wizardry of the magic of Lucasfilm. But today, I think all of us can create wonderful content with the tools that is available. So it's kind of related to what we're discussing today, because this shifts that we're seeing in the media world I think plays very well to potentially fuel this transformation of the art world, because art, if you look at it broadly, is a form of entertainment. It overlaps with it. So we think that the shifts that we're seeing through in the media world will probably fuel the transformation of the art world and the digital art space as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Given that there's a time, and then I think there are a few more topics we want to cover, and quite important topics as well. I think thank you, Howie, for that. Your thoughts on this, and obviously from covering media. So I want to move on to something next. The topic. This is both popular and unpopular at the same time, right? Legal and compliance implications. Because I mean, this is something that nobody really want to hear when it comes to regulations, and that you will have to comply to certain things. But I will still have to talk about this because after all, NFT exists on the blockchain and crypto space, and cryptocurrency and the use of cryptocurrency for payments, etc., are actually I would say regulated in Singapore, and not just Singapore but everywhere else where FATF actually have a reach over as well. So Julian, maybe can I have your thoughts in terms of the legal and compliance aspect? Maybe starting with regards to on NFT itself, right? The status on NFT, potentially how can it potentially be regulated, given that there is a certain almost prescriptive, I would say, treatment that's actually being reflected by FATF recently in their recent guidelines that was released, the document. So maybe I'll start with that. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe you can share with our audience.
Okay, sure. I think okay, so let's just jump straight into the FATF question, because there's obviously a lot of commentary about that online. I would say two things. First, it's a draft, right? The draft, the what we're talking about is a proposal for a draft amendment, and that hasn't been voted on. There will be further changes, and they're looking at it again in June. Secondly, it's the entire argument that the FATF is, says basically we're going to have KYC ML all on NFTs, hangs on a bit of tea reading of one word change, right? There's a change of a word from fungible to interchangeable when they're describing that, the specific words are that the VA and VASP definitions are intended to capture specific financial activities and operations and assets that are convertible or interchangeable, right? And it previously said assets that are fungible. And that's the entire basis on which people are concluding that, the FATF is going to regulate NFTs. Is that really viable? I think to answer that question, we have to go back to Hog Lai's primer of what is an NFT, right? An NFT, as Hog Lai pointed out, it is defined by what it is not, right? It's a token that is not fungible, and that is and what else is it? Well, it could be anything, right? I mean, today we see a lot of it as art products and so forth, but it could really be anything. And if you read the word interchangeable, if you read the word fungible as simply, well, can be sold for money, then you are essentially saying that any and every asset is a virtual asset. Any asset that's digital is a virtual asset for the purposes of the FATF, and anybody who engages in any virtual asset is therefore a VSP, right? That's clearly not viable. And I expect that if the FATF tries to put that notion that any transaction on that happens digitally is subject to FATF guidelines, they're gonna experience significant pushback. So they're being very careful about this area. They're being they understand. If you look at kind of the whole draft, right, and the changes in the draft, they do understand that this is like a very wide area, and to say that yes, there are certain NFTs that could potentially have traits that make them assets which should be subject to FATF guidelines. Yes. Does that mean every NFT is? It's the same. It's the same question we went through in the ICO boom when we asked ourselves, was every token a security? Right? Can a token be a security? Yes. Does that mean every token is a security? No. So this stretch where the FATF says yes, certain NFTs can have traits that make them virtual assets that that people who engage with them should then be regulated as that? Absolutely. And I don't think anybody would agree with that point, that it is possible to construct a NFT that has traits that will put them in the category. But that's a very different thing from saying that every single NFT is now a virtual asset.
Okay. Okay, I think that's a very good, I would say, even as a primer, right, to explain the situation, because I think this is very unclear. I mean, not just with FATF, but also with local jurisdiction, because like, I think for MES, I'm quite sure they are still working out the treatment of exactly what NFTs are, not just in Singapore, everywhere as well, right? And even I think Hester Pierce, the SEC commissioner, did say that potentially they could be securities, but her personal opinion that it shouldn't be. So with that kind of even differing views between various obviously regulators, I think this will take some time before people can look into it. Now, but of course, I think the getting to be something more mundane, the payment for the NFTs, which is actually in cryptocurrency like Ethereum, USDT, or even Bitcoin, whatever, I would believe that is actually going to be, or rather it should be regulated, because that is a payment, right? So that's under Payment Services Act. So when you actually pay for something using cryptocurrency, then it is probably prudent to believe that that platform that accepts the payment needs to be regulated. Right.
I think that's something that we need to look at from a case by case basis, and talking about who is involved, because I think all too often when people say something X is regulated, right, they're not examining the nuance and the detail over who involved with X. I mean, even the FATF guidelines talk about it, right? The fact that something is a virtual asset doesn't mean that anyone who does anything in connection with the virtual asset is a VASP. Right, so there are specific people involved in it. So are we talking? So in the context of here, right? Are we talking about the artist? Are we talking about the platform? Are we talking about the buyer? Are we talking about reselling? Right, and at each along the chain, everybody has a different set of activities, and they are regulated differently, right? So I think we can't answer the question very generically like this. A lot of the platforms that sell NFTs also have other activities that deal with them. Which may then subject them to a different set of regulations, or be swept under regulations because of that. So I think it's
okay.
sure.
I think
yeah.
Sure. I think we probably can have a deeper discussion. As I mentioned, there'll be a deeper dive sessions on the regulations on that, because that is a 3-hour session at least when you go into regulations, right? So, but I think we can cover, because there are certain questions from the audience. For instance, they are asking what are the financial crime aspects, money laundering, sanctions, and all that. Yes, I think potentially yes, right? I mean that can be implicated, but I think it is a very big topic by itself, and I hope to whoever asked the questions, right, that we will cover that in the next panel in deep dive. I think on a legality point of view, I think there are a couple of questions, right? People are asking that, the question is that if, let's say, for instance, the tokens are not fungible, do they still own the meme? Right? Like, for instance, they create a meme or artwork, do they still own the meme? And also people are asking, are there copyright claims, right? Since they buy it, do they have a copyright to the piece of art they buy? So maybe Julian, from a legality point of view, what do you think?
Okay, so that's the other area I think that NFTs bring up, which is kind of all the IP rights that go around it. And again, if we go back to the to Hog Life's primer, right? The NFT, aside from the fact that it's non-fungible, other than that, right? There's very little prescribed about what the NFT must be. And so to if you forget the analogy, an NFT, the structure of an NFT is a blank canvas, right? The artist can paint whatever kind of legal structure they want around it using the structure. So, do they paint it so that, do they say that, look, the NFT is just the right to see the art? Does it also give people, the holder of the NFT, the right to make derivative works like T-shirts and put it into videos and so forth? Does it actually assign the copyright of the underlying piece of art, right? If there's a secondary sale, does the artist get a cut? All these things are not today are not standardized, right? So across the market, there's full flexibility for everybody for the artist to really determine this. So it's very much unlike the physical art world, where there's that when you sell a piece of art, what you're selling is that art. You don't sell the underlying copyright, so the artist can Leonardo da Vinci can paint another Mona Lisa, right? You don't sell the right to make derivative works. So the fact that I have bought a painting doesn't give me the right to make a T-shirt of the painting. So with the traditional world, it's static. With NFTs, it's wide open, right? You can do whatever you like. You can construct it as the artist and the platform construct it the way you want. As the buyer, therefore, it becomes very important for you as the buyer to determine what exactly you're buying, and that is typically embedded in the terms and conditions of the platform you use. So, for instance, it's if you are thinking of buying crypto art and making T-shirts with it, right? It will be critically important to understand whether you're buying hash masks, which allow you to use to permit commercial use, such as making T-shirts. Buying crypto kitties, which allows you to do that, but capped at 100,000 a year, right? And more than that, you need to go back to Dapper Labs, which is the company behind CryptoKitties, and get a license for which presumably they want to get paid. Or you're buying NBA Top Shots, where you can't do this at all, right? And this is all in the terms and conditions if you review it. So it becomes important because these are non-fungible, right? Everyone is different, and therefore you as the buyer need to review the specific terms of exactly what you are buying, and spot if there's anything particularly of concern, right? So I think Jenny mentioned just now Top Shots and how convenient it was. One of the downsides of that is that I was going through the Top Shot terms, and one of the particular things that would concern me if I were to buy is that if they believe, and I'm just reading the terms here, if we reasonably believe that you are engaged in any of the category B prohibited activities, and so there's a list of activities and terms and conditions, we reserve the right to immediately confiscate any moments, which is the NFT, that were purchased or acquired as a result of such activities, right? So, your NFTs can be taken away at a moment based on a suspicion by them that you have done something against one of the terms and conditions. Not proof, not verified in court, purely a suspicion, right? And so this is embedded in what you're buying. So caveat emptor, right? Review the terms, just like the ICO boom, right? Review the white papers, review the terms. It is the flexibility that artists are getting is mirrored by the responsibility on the part of the artist of the buyers to basically review what is being done with all this flexibility.
Okay. I think with that in mind, and given that we have a bit of running out of time, I think let's probably move on to the next topic and all that. So I think we also want to give some time to answer some of the pending questions, right? I saw a lot of questions from the audience. Probably we can't answer everything today. We will cover these questions. Rest assured, nothing is wasted. I record everything down. So any questions that's probably not answered today will potentially be answered in other panels that is a whole series of panels. So watch the space. Your questions should be answered in other panels, right? So I think one topic we want to talk about before we end this session to go on to some of these questions that I think the audience has asked is that, there is a NFT. This couple of days, right? There's been these couple of articles coming out saying that is there an NFT market crash in the offering? Even before it started to really get up, I think people are asking whether is it going to crash. Same thing, right? When Bitcoin first came up, people say, oh, it's going to crash the next few years and all that. Never did, right? But I think same question again, because they are saying that there's a recent drastic drop in the value and prices and all that. So maybe Journey, probably can start off your thoughts on this. Do you think there is an NFT market crash coming?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, right? I think in terms of market, there's always cycle, and if you look at the price in NFT sales, basically last year the total NFT market was less than 400 million, but this year in the first quarter we have already reached 1.3 billion. That's on Ethereum alone, and if you count NBA Top Shot, which is on another blockchain called Flow, that's another $500 million. So personally, again, not financial advice here, what goes up, sometimes it will come down. But if we look at NFT in terms of as a tool or infrastructure, I think we're still really early, to be honest. And a lot of these experiments, right? Whether it's games or GIFs or images, and people are really testing and pushing the boundary of what is possible to be built on the blockchain. And also, again, I think Hotline just mentioned earlier, and Christie is actually auctioning a set of 9 CryptoPunks by the original creators of CryptoPunk, and Howie is very interested, and maybe he will place a bid there. So I think, I mean, okay, Christie is estimating the price, the sale will be at about $7 to $9 million. And I think that itself is really not showing a slowdown in terms of, new sort of sales, whether it's from the crypto native marketplaces or the traditional auctioning houses. So personally, I think it's just worth, observing, learning, and exploring more.
Thank you. Over to Howie.
Agree with Johnny. It is literally, pardon the pun, it is a journey where the beginning of this whole phase. But I will quote David Hockney. He is, you guys know Beeple. Beeple sold at 69, so making him the third highest living artist. The highest living artist is this artist called David Hockney. So his painting went for, I think, 80-90 mil. And he was asked about NFT. And he says it's ICS, it's International Crooks and Swindlers. So not my words, you can check it online, that's what he said. So I think different people have different views, but I think it's exciting space because I think this is a interesting hairpin turn that could take art into a brand new trajectory with different potentials. But as Julian mentioned, there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of fine prints that are yet to be harmonized and yet to be surface and potentially become some form of industry standards. So we're in early days, and I think it's hard to look for regulations right now because it is moving so fast. So even in the world of AI that we think is quite mainstream, there's still a lot of work around AI governance that is a work in progress trying to catch up. So I think it's an exciting space, but I think buyers beware because what can go up, can come down, can also still go up.
Yes, as with any other, the investments as well, right? Even for the real traditional investment, it is always a natural cycle. So I think probably to end it off, I'll just ask, your thoughts as well, Julian, on this. Is it going to crash? I mean, do you see that it's going to crash, or you feel that, hey, still a lot of road to run?
So, I mean, I'm a lawyer because I'm a terrible investor. So I'm probably the wrong person to answer this question. But to answer based on a tweet about that I think CZ put recently about crypto generally, right? Whether it's going down or not is a function of how much you zoom out. And so, as Howie pointed out, it'll go up, it'll come down, it'll go up some more. And I think that, the growth of NFTs and where it's going to bring the art world and our whole world generally, right, with all the other use cases, in the long run, it's definitely bullish. Whether in the spot it's up or down is anyone's guess.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay, because running out of time, but I still want certain questions to be answered. So again, I want to reassure everyone, if your questions is not answered today, it's not going to go into some void and all that. I'm actually tabulating all these questions, and this will be actually covered in topics in the upcoming panels that we have scheduled. So rest assured. So don't go away and think that, okay, no one answered me. No, that's not going to happen. We're going to cover those questions as well. But there are some questions we're going to cover right now. So I think I'm going to combine a couple of questions again. So I think there are a couple of questions that say, is there any way to link the physical art asset to a contract? I see, like real physical art, not just on digital art as well. Is there any way to do that, and would that cover anti-forgery? Secondly, is that because again on the physical aspect, right? Will NFT one day become a declarable asset like shares, or even declarable asset like because some people they do declare art pieces as assets, right? Do they need to declare that as well? So one fine day. So between the physical and NFTs, what do you think are the how do you link that? So maybe Julian can start that.
Okay, I mean, certainly for Singapore and English law generally, the common law generally, there's almost a division between the law of personal rights, so rights as against a person, and rights as against property. And blockchain assets have created a lot of headaches for lawyers in this space. About is it a right as against a person, and if so, who? or is it rights against property? So it's kind of sitting in the middle in that space, and we may have to come up with whole new jurisprudence to deal with this. In terms of connecting a physical asset, to the blockchain directly, the question is who connects it, right? So who is that typically a person? Because at this point, virtual assets tend not to be covered under the law of real property. That it's doable by contract, but it relies on a connection to a person. And so if you have an NFT which essentially says, look, I own the copyright, and as is true for many of the NFTs today, right? I'm the platform. I own the copyright. I grant you a license to this piece of art, right? That's and you could then print that and produce a physical product, right? That relies on a claim against me contractually, and so then if I go in, if the company goes bust, if there's a takeover of the company, or the asset is sold, or if I sell the copyright, there's a whole host of complexities around how you end up enforcing that right over a physical asset.
Okay. Hope that answers the questions as well. So there's this question on provenance, right? So I think because Howie, you just now mentioned provenance, especially give a very good example of that painting, right, with regards to provenance. So the question is that if there's a contest on NFT, right, in terms of regards to provenance, how do you actually potentially, resolve that? Given that, let's say, for instance, the provenance example, you said, okay, it can be this, it was actually the master who painted it, but then it was listed as the student. Later on, maybe the other student can say they actually painted it instead of the master. So how do you think that, in terms of contest of provenance can be resolved?
The contest of provenance in the real world is actually very messy as well, because there's no straight line. Because you could argue that the appearance of the painting in a book is provenance. Sometimes the book was misprinted. There are technology elements to test provenance as well. So, for example, you can use spectrometry to say, I test the actual pigment that is used. So, I'll give you a specific example. If you have a white of this painting that was supposed to be painted in the 1910s, but the white turns out to be a titanium white that was only introduced in 1921, then provenance goes away. So the reason I bring all this up is because, as what Julian was saying, NFT is a very broad term, but at the end of the day, you look at the actual wording behind it and the rights behind it. I think that will really be a source of differentiator, because it sounds like potentially that you could have two NFTs pointing to the same digital assets, but potentially different rights. So I think it's not so clear cut right now. But my main takeaway listening to Julian is that for whatever I want to buy, better read the terms and conditions and the fine print in a lot of details. So I don't think we have a straight answer yet in terms of how that provenance, but I don't think we'll ever get to a straight answer for provenance, because provenance in the real world or in the physical world is just as complex.
Okay.
Kevin, I would add to that, right? The blockchain element, secures the provenance once it's on chain, right? So once from the time the NFT has been minted until the day you buy it, that sequence. It doesn't secure the off-chain pre-minting issues, right? So the actual creation of the art and so forth. And then for that, we run right into the issues that Howie mentioned.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we only have time for one more question, which I'm going to ask Journey. I think Journey, given that you are very, very heavily involved in the NFT community, I think you have talked to various groups and all that. So there's this question that, what is the level of readiness of buyers in regards to being reached through NFTs, right? I think this question comes from a traditional art content creator, right? Because I think if you talk to those still in the buyers of artwork who doesn't really know NFT, they are really not very sure about it, which is why difficult to get people into this space. So the question is that, do you see the education of buyers can be done without the intermediaries? Because since I think one of the key things we talk about is the disruption of the intermediaries, right? Letting the artists to go direct to the buyers. Now, without the intermediaries who typically run events of art gallery events, and then they invite people to come and look at art and obviously feed them good food and good champagne, make them very happy, and then obviously they buy. But now we have all this kind of nice glitzy stuff, to get people interested. How do you actually then, in your thoughts and also probably speaking with people, how do you think can we actually get buyers involved, right? I mean, buyers, given that they can spend millions of dollars and all that? How do you think you can get them involved, especially with a larger audience without intermediary?
That's such a complex question, and I'm not sure if I'm actually I would say, okay, a lot of the people call crypto whales, right? Like people who have amassed a lot of wealth, being early Bitcoin or crypto investors or traders. I think they are actually really the OG NFT collectors in this case. For example, Beeple's collector, who's Meta Colvin, right? He spent $69 million on a piece of digital collage. And he has amassed a lot of other NFTs as well. And I would say within the sort of crypto community, they have their own bias as well. And they will look at all these projects, for example, CryptoPunk, because it has all these histories, because it inspired a new token standard, which is the ERC 721. I think those are kind of the, like what Julian has mentioned as well, it's really a lot of research into, the background, and also sometimes it's within your community. Probably it's also similar to the traditional art collection community. I think how we can probably comment on that as well. So I don't think NFT itself is going to remove the bias, even though it does have all these secondary marketplaces like OpenSea. You can mint and sell your artwork, but essentially there's still. Again, I think back to what Julian has mentioned, I totally agree that as a curator, right, such as Nifty Gateway or Super Rare, they actually curate and verify the digital artworks that they're selling on their platform. And those are the value that they provide. And I think some of the buyers will probably go to these curated platforms to look for potential collections.
Right. Any other last thought from Julian and also how you want to add on to this? Because I think it's like the whole idea is taking away the intermediaries. Now, how do you actually promote all this, right, to buyers who are not very familiar with this? So I mean, hearing from Journey and also from myself as well, I mean, coming from crypto, this is a totally new set of buyers. Previously, they probably have not stepped into, some of them probably have not stepped into art gallery or even to a museum. But now, because of the NFT space, they have the money, obviously, made from the riches from the crypto bull run to actually spend on NFTs, and they buy the art. So this, I mean, even to traditional artists and traditional content provider or developer, this is a new market of buyers they can have access to. I think it's more because of that. But I would just probably leave the final thoughts to, let's say, Julian and Howie, if you were to comment as well.
Sure. I think I think I see this. It's not specifically NFT, but it's the general. As Howie mentioned earlier, right? There's a general trend of disintermediation, unbundling, but then after that you also see rebundling, right? So there, these are underlying necessities that buyers need to have in the market. Creating greater access. What has happened is that there's now greater access, right? So more people coming from more different views will be coming into the market, and they will need similar kinds of needs, but it will be met in a different way. So I think I don't think there's anything that anyone can do to push this. It will organically evolve as kind of like new players discover new niches to go into and to meet those needs.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just add that the speed in which we are getting hyper digitalized and hyper connected, the reality of us living in a digital world is I mean, Ready Player One is fast becoming a reality. So our digital identity, our digital presence, our digital existence, I think soon will become even more pronounced than it is today. Today we have a digital presence on LinkedIn, a digital presence on IG and many others, but increasingly our digital presence will become even more pronounced, which means the need to have digital assets, to have digital possessions, digital plots will probably be more. So the type of buying behavior probably will change, and it probably may not center around the three bubbles I talked about earlier. So I think the company or the platform that is best able to predict that need and best able to serve that need in the easiest possible way, like what Amazon has done for e-commerce, like what Grab has done for transportation, will emerge the winner.
Okay, thank you. With that being the final thoughts and also to this, we would like to close the session for today. Again, a reassurance, the rest of the question that's coming in, even as of now, they will be compiled and they will be addressed in all the future panels. Again, you will see the two gentlemen and a lady here today in this panel to be in other separate panels as well. And this session will be is already recorded. It will be shared on social media, namely on YouTube. Once it's ready and ready for viewing, we will share it with the attendees. You can actually share it with your friends as well to view this. But watch the space from Blockchain Association of Singapore. We'll be sharing the details of the next panels coming in from art creators, artists, content creators, buyers, right? We'll try to get hold of the big buyer himself, right? Not mentioning names, but who are actually buying such art to discuss this, right? So they have a better appreciation of what actually buyers are looking at and exactly what artists can create. So I think these are upcoming out in here. But today, I really have to give very good thanks to Howie, Julian, as well as Journey, for your time and participation and really very valuable thoughts to this topic, which is a new topic, but also something that is a bit, can be nebulous, but we managed to put it down to some specifics that we can discuss and share with the audience. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you to Hotline for sharing that primer, because it's a very good primer to beginners and newbies to this space so they can at least understand this. So with that, I thank you, the audience participation as well. Really, really strong audience participation today. Look forward to sharing the next few panels with everyone. With that in mind, thank you very much. Have a good weekend ahead, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.